What if the story you tell yourself about your past, what if that's actually holding you back?
And, what if feeling unhappy isn't some heavy anchor dragging you down,
Yeah.
but maybe a choice you're making right now.
Yeah, exactly. That's the kind of perspective shift we're exploring today.
Right. This deep dive, it takes us straight into a way of thinking about psychology that could, well, it could really change how you see your life.
Totally. And you, our listener, you actually pointed us towards this fantastic source, The Courage to Be Disliked.
Ah, yes, the dialogue. It unpacks Alfred Adler's theories, which are surprisingly relevant even today.
Definitely. Maybe you're feeling kind of stuck or life feels, overwhelming sometimes. We get that.
So our goal here is to pull out the really impactful ideas from Adler as they're presented in this conversation.
Without getting bogged down in like super dense theory, think of it as getting the essential toolkit, a fresh perspective.
Exactly. Our mission is pretty focused to really get a grip on the core ideas of Adlerian psychology from this book.
We want to see how these ideas challenge, well, what we normally think about trauma and change and happiness.
It's about getting right to the heart of it.
Okay, let's unpack this then. So, who was this Alfred Adler? You hear Freud, you hear Jung all the time, but Adler, he feels a bit more obscure.
Yeah, Freud and Jung, they definitely get more airtime.
Yeah.
But Adler was right there with them, an Austrian psychiatrist, often called the unknown third giant of that whole psychoanalytic movement.
The unknown third giant, like that.
And his approach, Adlerian psychology, that's the foundation for the whole discussion in the book we're looking at.
And what really grabbed me was how the book connects Adler's ideas way back, like all the way back to ancient Greek philosophy, Socrates, Plato. That felt unexpected.
It is a fascinating link, isn't it? The philosopher character in the dialogue, he really emphasizes this. He says, Adlerian psychology lines up very neatly with Greek thought.
He even mentions translating Plato himself, right, to show that connection.
He does. It highlights this deep intellectual lineage, you could say.
And it's not like these ideas just vanish. The book makes a point that Adler's influence is actually, well, it's kind of hidden in plain sight in a lot of popular self-help stuff.
Absolutely. People like Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People,
A classic.
and Stephen Covey, The Seven Habits. Their work has clear echoes of Adlerian thinking.
So these concepts are maybe more mainstream than we realize, just without the Adler label necessarily attached.
Precisely. They've sort of filtered into our general understanding of personal growth.
Okay, so we have this hugely influential, unknown giant, deep roots, wide reach. Let's get to the main event. This central question the book kicks off with, can people really change? And can they choose to be happy?
Yes, and this is where the dialogue in the book gets really interesting right away. The philosopher, he makes this incredibly bold claim
Which is?
that people can change, absolutely. And, what's more, they can find happiness, without exception.
Wow, okay, no exceptions. That's
Yeah.
bold is the right word. And the youth in the dialogue, he pushes back immediately, doesn't he? He brings up a real-life example.
He does. He talks about his friend, someone who's basically a recluse. Wants to go out, wants to get a job, wants to change,
Hmm.
but seems totally stuck, paralyzed by anxiety.
That feels very relatable, that struggle. It sets up the core tension perfectly. Can this person really choose something different?
Exactly. And it tees up this fundamental challenge to how we usually think about why people are the way they are. Which brings us to Adler's view on, well, trauma and the past.
Right, this idea of a denying trauma. How does that work? Let's break that down. What's Adler's angle here?
Okay, so Adler basically says, our past experiences, even traumatic ones, don't determine our present or future. He contrasts two ways of thinking.
Okay.
There's etiology, which is focusing on past causes. I am this way because this happened to me.
Right, that sounds like standard psychology almost.
It's very common, yes.
Yeah.
But Adler championed teleology. That means focusing on your present goals. I am behaving this way in order to achieve something right now.
So living towards a goal, not because of a cause.
Exactly. So back to the youth's reclusive friend.
How would Adler see that differently?
Well, the etiological view might say his past trauma or maybe bad experiences caused his anxiety, which makes him stay inside.
Okay, makes sense.
The Adlerian, the teleological view, would say something different. It might suggest the friend first has the goal, I don't want to go outside.
Okay.
And then he creates the feelings of anxiety and fear as a justification or a tool to achieve that goal of staying home.
That almost sounds like it's saying his feelings aren't real. But the book clarifies that, right? The anxiety is genuine.
Absolutely genuine. The philosopher stresses that. The fear, the physical symptoms maybe, they are completely real. But the reason they exist, in the Adlerian view, is to serve that present purpose, that goal of not going out.
So it's about the purpose of the feeling in the now, not just its origin story in the past.
You got it. Understanding the function it serves right now.
And this idea that our present goals shape our feelings. It applies to things like anger, too, like those moments where you feel you just explode.
Yes, another really provocative piece of Adlerian thought. Anger, the book suggests, isn't necessarily this uncontrollable wave that washes over you.
It often feels like it is.
It does. But Adler would frame it as a tool, something we pick up, maybe unconsciously, to achieve an aim.
Okay, the example in the book was the mother yelling at her daughter. Can you walk through that again? How is the anger a tool there?
Right. So the mother and daughter are disagreeing. The dialogue suggests the mother doesn't just get overwhelmed by rage and then start shouting. Instead, she gets angry in order to shout. The anger gives her the power or the justification in that moment to raise her voice to try and dominate the argument and make the daughter back down.
So the shouting achieves the goal, and the anger is the means to get to the shouting.
Precisely. The anger serves the goal of asserting her opinion quickly and forcefully. It's a tool for interpersonal control in that moment.
Wow. Okay, so if we're, in a sense, choosing these responses, these emotions, even anger, that leads to this really challenging idea the book talks about, the courage to be unhappy. That unhappiness itself might be a choice.
It is challenging. And again, the youth in the dialogue voices the skepticism many of us feel. Saying unhappiness is a choice can sound incredibly harsh, right? Especially when life throws genuinely difficult things at you.
It feels like blaming the victim sometimes.
It can sound that way initially, but the philosopher counters by saying, look, even people who do objectively terrible things, like criminals, they usually have some internal logic, some justification, where they frame their actions as being good for them in some way, serving their goals.
Okay, like a twisted sense of purpose.
Exactly, and the point isn't that we choose everything that happens. We don't choose our birth circumstances or accidents or illnesses.
Right.
But, the philosopher argues, we do choose our lifestyle, which in Adlerian terms means our overall orientation towards life, how we interpret experiences, how we respond. And that choice, in the present, shapes whether we experience life as happy or unhappy.
Our interpretation and response.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Which leads us to another massive idea in Adlerian psychology, that all our problems are basically interpersonal relationship problems. That sounds huge.
It's a huge claim. But the idea is that many negative feelings, especially feelings of inferiority, don't actually come from some objective lack in ourselves.
Where do they come from then?
From comparison. From measuring ourselves against other people within our relationships. This makes a feeling subjective, not an objective fact.
The philosopher uses his own height as an example, which I thought was pretty clever.
Yeah, it's very relatable. He says, look, I'm 6'1". That's just measurement. It's neither good nor bad in itself.
Just a fact.
Just a fact. It only becomes a feeling of inferiority if he starts comparing himself, say, to someone who's 6'3" and feeling like he comes up short. Without that social comparison, the feeling wouldn't even arise.
Okay, that makes the subjectivity clear. Now, the book draws a line between that normal feeling of inferiority and an inferiority complex. What's the difference there?
Good question. A feeling of inferiority is seen as pretty normal, even healthy sometimes. It can motivate us to strive, to learn, to improve. You feel you lack something, so you work to gain it.
Like wanting to learn a new skill?
Exactly. But an inferiority complex is when that feeling curdles into an excuse. It's when someone starts saying, oh, I can't do X because I'm not smart enough, tall enough, good enough. They use their perceived inferiority to avoid life's challenges.
So the complex is like a shield, an excuse.
Right. And then there's the flip side, the superiority complex, which the book says actually springs from feeling inferior. That seems kind of backwards at first glance.
Yeah, how does that work? If you feel inferior, why act superior?
Adler's idea is that the superiority complex is often a mask, a compensation. Someone feels deeply inadequate, maybe has an inferiority complex they can't face. So they put on a show, they boast, they act arrogant, they pretend to be way better than everyone else to try and cover up that hidden feeling of being less than. It's like puffing yourself up because you secretly feel small.
Okay. That makes more sense. It's overcompensation.
Precisely. It stems from lacking the courage to face challenges and improve in healthy ways.
So if life isn't supposed to be this constant competition, this struggle to prove we're better than others, what's the alternative? How does Adler suggest we approach growth?
Well, Adler talks about the pursuit of superiority,
Yeah.
but he means something different by it. It's not about being superior to others.
No.
No, it's about striving for self-improvement, making progress on your own path, moving forward from the person you were yesterday.
Okay, self-focused growth.
Exactly. The book uses this really nice analogy.
Mm.
Imagine everyone is walking forward on a vast, flat plain. Some people walk faster, some slower. Some started earlier, some later.
Right.
But everyone is fundamentally equal, just moving forward at their own pace and their own direction. There's no single peak everyone is racing towards. We're different, but equal.
That's a powerful image, walking on a flat plane. I like that. And it connects nicely to this next really critical idea, the separation of tasks. This sounds super important for just navigating life with other people.
It's absolutely fundamental in Adlerian practice. It's all about boundaries, really.
How does it work? What do you mean, separation of tasks?
It means when you encounter a problem or a situation involving someone else, you ask a simple question. Ultimately, whose task is this? Whose responsibility is it to deal with the consequences of this choice or action?
Okay.
And the rule is, don't intervene in other people's tasks, and don't let other people intervene in yours. It sounds simple, but it's tricky.
Can you give us that example again? Maybe the one about parents and kids studying. That made it clearer for me.
Sure. So, a child needs to study for school. Whose task is studying?
Ah, the child's.
Right. The consequences of not studying, poor grades, maybe repeating a year, fall directly on the child. So studying is the child's task.
But parents want their kids to do well. They try to help or make them study.
Of course. And parents can offer support, create a good study environment, maybe offer help if asked. That's their task, providing support. But trying to force the child to study, constantly nagging, doing the homework for them.
That's intervening in the child's task.
Exactly. It often leads to rebellion or makes the child dependent. It's crossing that boundary. The parent is trying to control an outcome that isn't theirs to control.
And the book points out that even when parents say, I'm doing this for your own good, it might actually be about their own needs, right? Like their anxiety or wanting to look good.
That's often the underlying driver, yes. It can be about the parent's fear or their desire for social approval more than the child's actual need in that moment.
So this applies everywhere. Work, friendships, romance.
Everywhere. And connects directly to another key idea, letting go of the need for recognition from others.
Ah, okay. How does that link up?
Well, if you're constantly doing things hoping others will approve or praise you,
Yeah.
you're basically letting them set your tasks. You're living according to their expectations.
You're trying to fulfill their task
Yeah.
of approving of you.
You could put it that way, yes.
Yeah.
You're seeking external validation instead of living by your own principles. And the book argues this is true even with, say, your parents. If you live only to satisfy their expectations, you're not living your own life. You're not free.
That sounds really difficult, especially with family. Why is ditching that desire for recognition so central for Adler?
Because constantly chasing approval means you're fundamentally unfree. You're living other people's lives, trying to meet their standards. You become a slave to their opinions.
So what's the alternative? What is freedom, then, in this view?
The book defines it in a really, well, startling way.
Yeah.
True freedom is being disliked by other people.
Whoa. Okay. Being disliked is freedom. That stops you in your tracks.
It does, but the idea isn't that you should actively try to be obnoxious or make people dislike you.
Right. Okay. That would be weird.
It's more about reaching a point where you are not afraid of being disliked, where you prioritize living according to your own values and principles, doing what you believe is right, and accepting that some people might not like it. Some people might disapprove or criticize you, and that's okay. Their disapproval doesn't control you anymore.
So freedom is not being bound by the fear of disapproval. That makes more sense.
Exactly. It's the courage to live your own life, even if it means not everyone is cheering you on.
And this shift away from needing approval, it also changes how we relate to people, right? Moving from judging and praising to something else. The book talks about horizontal relationships and encouragement.
That's right. Adler was critical of what he called vertical relationships. One's based on hierarchy, where one person is above and just as the other, whether through praise or criticism.
Wait, even praise is problematic. We usually think of praise as a good thing.
Well, think about it. When you praise someone, like saying, good job, or you're so clever, there's an implicit judgment, isn't there?
I guess so. Like, you're the one qualified to judge them.
Exactly. It comes from a position of assumed superiority. It can also create dependency, where people only act to get that praise. Adler advocated for horizontal relationships, relationships between equals.
Okay, so how do you interact in a horizontal way? What replaces praise?
Encouragement. But it's not just watered-down
What's
praise.
the difference then?
Encouragement is about expressing gratitude, respect, or appreciation for someone's contribution or effort without judgment. It focuses on their existence and their actions, not on evaluating their worth.
So instead of good job cleaning your room,
You might say, thank you for cleaning your room, it really helps out, or I appreciate you making that effort. See the difference? It acknowledges their contribution as an equal.
yeah, it feels less evaluative, more connecting, thank you, instead of good job.
Exactly. It builds connection based on mutual respect, not judgment.
Okay, but what if someone isn't really in a position to actively contribute or achieve things in the way society usually values, like someone who's elderly or ill? Does this focus on tasks and contribution mean they have less value? That's a potential worry.
That's a really important point, and the book addresses it directly. Adlerian psychology is very clear.
Yeah.
Human worth is not conditional on usefulness or achievement.
Ooh, okay. Good.
People have inherent value simply by being alive, by existing. The example used is often someone like an elderly, bedridden grandparent. They might not be able to do much in a practical sense,
Right.
but their presence, their existence, still contributes value to the family. And crucially, the feeling of contribution is subjective. It's about feeling like you belong and are useful to someone, even in small ways. Just being there, being loved, can provide that feeling.
So worth is inherent, not earned through action. And the feeling of contribution is internal. Got it.
Precisely. It's not about judging people based on their level of activity.
Okay, that leads us towards the end of the dialogue in the book, where it talks about living differently in time, focusing on the here and now.
Yes. Moving away from being defined by past causes, etiology, or solely focused on future destinations, teleology taken to an extreme.
So what's the idea?
The concept presented is that life is a series of moments, like dots, not a line. And the goal is to live each moment, each dot, earnestly and completely.
Like dancing. The book uses a dance analogy, right?
Exactly. Think about dancing. When you're dancing, the goal isn't just to arrive at some final pose. The process is the point. You're fully engaged in each step, each movement.
You're living the dance itself.
Right. This is contrasted with, say, a mountain climber view of life, where you suffer through the whole climb, just focus on reaching the summit. If you don't reach it, the whole journey feels like a failure.
But in the dance, every moment matters.
Every moment has the potential for completion and satisfaction. Adler called this kind of living energial life, where the process, the activity itself, is the fulfillment, living fully in the here and now.
That sounds much less stressful than constantly striving for some future point.
It can be. It's about finding meaning in the present moment's activity.
And to help navigate all this, the tasks, the relationships, the living in, now that the book gives this kind of guiding principle, right? A guiding star.
Yes, the grand compass for a life seeking freedom and happiness within this framework is contribution to others. Or maybe better put, a feeling of contribution to the community.
So focusing outward on how you can help or be useful in some way.
Essentially, yes. The idea is that if you orient yourself towards contributing to the well-being of others, towards your community, however you define that, then you won't lose your way. You'll have a sense of purpose and belonging. And significantly, this compass works whether people like you or not, whether you get praised or not. Your focus is on contribution, not reception.
So that contribution gives you direction and meaning, regardless of the external feedback.
That's the core idea. It becomes your North Star.
Okay, wow, we've covered a lot of ground there. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Adlerian psychology via The Courage to be Disliked, what are maybe, say, 2 or 3 of the absolute key takeaways, the things that might really stick with our listener?
Okay. I think number 1 is probably the realization, or at least the possibility, that you have more power in the present than you think. The power to choose your response, your lifestyle, rather than just being a product of your past. That's huge.
The power of the present choice, yeah. What else?
Second, I'd say the separation of tasks. Understanding that concept, really asking whose task is this, it has the potential to just untangle so many knots in our relationships, create clearer boundaries, more respect.
Yeah, that one feels incredibly practical. Maybe one more.
And maybe the third is finding that sense of value and purpose, not just in grand achievements, but in the present moment, through this feeling of contribution to others. It shifts the focus from what can I get to what can I give.
Those are great takeaways. Powerful stuff. So for you listening, maybe think about how these ideas land for you. How do they connect with whatever brought you here today?
Yeah, what tasks in your own life feel a bit tangled up? Could separating them bring some clarity?
And what might change if you shifted focus, even just a little, from dwelling on past causes to thinking about your present goals and how you want to live now?
It's definitely a different way of looking at things.
Yeah.
Adlerian psychology, it offers this really deep, potentially transformative perspective. This has just been a taste, really.
Absolutely. Just scratching the surface. If any of this sparks something, we'd really encourage you to check out The Source, The Courage to be Disliked, or look into other Adlerian resources.
There's a lot more to explore there.
And maybe a final thought to leave you with. Perhaps true courage isn't about never feeling fear or never having problems.
Maybe it's more about the willingness to be disliked sometimes as you navigate your own path, guided by your own compass of contribution.
That feels like a good place to pause. Thank you, truly, for sharing your sources and for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for listening.